Kevin Gordon here from Autosavant.com with your March 13th edition of the Afternoon Commute. It's our 29th one so far. It seems like they're just flying by. This weekend I posted an article about innovation in motorsport and my idea of a way to bring it back. And in that article I focused primarily on Formula One. Well, it looks like I focused on the wrong form of motorsport, because pictured here is the race car that Nissan plans to run at Le Mans, or Le Mans for all of you Americans out there. It, as a few sites have pointed out today, does look a little bit like a rocket. It's going to be a pretty lightweight thing and powered by a 1.6 liter 4-cylinder turbo whose primary foundation as a motor comes from the Nissan Juke. It's then going to be, of course, appropriately massaged by an aftermarket company and should produce a little bit over 300 horsepower when it's done. What class is it going to run in Le Mans? Well, it's not going to run in the standard LMP2 or LMP1 classes. It's actually going to run in a new experimental prototype class, which doesn't really have any particular rules about it, I'm sure, with the exception of some safety requirements. So it's pretty interesting, that Nissan's going to take a shot at something that's so different than everything else out there, and as I had hoped for so heavily, bring some innovation back to something where all of the cars started to look more and more similar as time went on. Next up today, Fisker, because what would a week of afternoon commutes be without a mention of the Fisker Auto Group, manufacturers of those hybrid electric cars, specifically and currently the Karma. Fisker is in a bit of trouble once again. There's actually two things going on with them. First, a former employee went out and got their whistle and started blowing it about the fact that Fisker released the Karma to market before it was actually ready in order to attempt to qualify for the Department of Energy loans, which I had talked about them not qualifying for a few weeks ago. I thought about this a little bit and thought to myself, well, I don't really know why this is all that surprising. Fisker's CEO, when they started talking about the Model S and the SUV version that they're going to be coming out with, fully admitted that he planned to release the cars to consumers before the journalists to make sure that they worked all the bugs out before they handed them to journalists. So maybe this isn't an issue. And of course I kid about this. It's an issue, and these are the types of things people get in trouble for. Well, what else has Fisker gotten into a bit of trouble with? Well, it's not actually Fisker themselves. It's the equity group that came up with most of the funding for Fisker. They're now under some SEC scrutiny for some potentially unlawful practices. So, looks like the trouble for Fisker's, oh man, I can't say Fisker today. It looks like the trouble for Fisker remains, and the likelihood of them continuing to exist as a company seems more and more unlikely. If they do somehow manage to make it, I think it's going to make the world's most interesting Harvard business case for, one of those Harvard Business Review little pamphlets about how to do all things wrong and still to succeed as a company. Number 3 for today, South by Southwest is happening. And if you're not a hipster, you may wonder what that is. Well, South by Southwest is a festival, I suppose you could call it, of musicians and movie releases, and a bunch of other things that takes place in Austin, Texas. In the beginning it was a little bit small. Well, now it's gotten more and more mainstream, and as a result, the auto manufacturers decided to go down there and release some of their stuff. Today, BMW announced that they are going to be partnering with Stitcher to allow the Stitcher application in-car connectivity the way Pandora and some of the other ones already do within that BMW suite of apps. So it'll be able to be controlled through iDrive and the touchscreen, and you'll be allowed for full interaction in the thing. Stitcher, again, for those of you who may not know, is really a podcast or distribution network that competes with iTunes. And in some ways it's nicer than iTunes because it doesn't have all the same set of restrictions. So you might hear, if you do listen to podcasts, the people who run them saying, go get a new podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. So that should be interesting, and it really is placing BMW in a bit of a leadership position from the in-car apps perspective and what you can do with them. I think this is going to become a race amongst manufacturers, and it's going to be interesting to see who comes up with the first open system, or iOS or one of the Android platforms directly in a car, where you can just go to the App Store and download almost anything you want directly to your car. Number 4 for today. Would you be interested in owning a Subaru BRZ, the new little lightweight rear-wheel drive sports coupe from Subaru and Toyota? Well, if you want a BRZ, you might as well head to your Toyota dealership immediately and place a deposit, because Car and Driver is reporting that they have reports from a Subaru dealer that's saying there will only be 6,000 of them imported to the United States, with estimated base pricing of around $25,000. If that's all true and not a carefully planted tidbit of information, they will sell out quickly, and it'll be pretty rare to actually find one sitting on a dealer lot. My question is this a bit of a strategy to really crank up interest and demand, and as a result pre-sell a bunch of them at full or above sticker price, and they'll manufacture as many of them as are required based on demand? We shall see. One way or another, it seems to be working. I have to admit, when I heard the news, I immediately sent an email to my local Subaru dealership just to figure out what the process would be to pre-order one and how much of a deposit it would take to get one. And finally, number 5 for today, and to close out the afternoon commute on this beautiful Tuesday, CarScoop has the best pictures so far on for the upcoming W222, I believe is the code name, S Class Mercedes. And a picture of it is here. And as you can see from the spy shot, it's not an enormous change from the previous generation S Class. There's a few nip and tucks. They've tightened some things up, carried over some of the design cues. I think more from the four-door coupes that they've been so successful with. And of course, they've added more awful LED lights to the front of it. The big change, at least is rumored to be the interior, where you can expect an enormous amount of screen in the S Class, potentially replacing the entire panel, much the way Land Rover Jaguar has, with a TFT display, a much larger nav screen, heads-up displays, night vision, all the rest of the tech. And the interfaces to those should be greatly enhanced, nicer to look at. If anything's true from the nav screen that we showed a week or two ago from the A Class that came out at Geneva. So stay tuned for more updates to that and more news as we move through 2012. I'm Kevin Gordon, as usual. It's the 13th of March afternoon commute, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.